Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge versus the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S8. Which one is better? Which one should you get? Well, the Samsung Galaxy S8 is newer, so it's obviously better. So I don't see why Samsung would make a phone that's newer and worse. So yeah, the Samsung Galaxy S8 is better than the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers. No, I was obviously just joking with ending the video. The S8 is still better than the S7 Edge. Now, here's the thing. The S8 is more expensive than the S7 Edge was when it launched. And apart from that, the S7 Edge is also cheaper now because the S8 is going to launch soon. So the S7 is almost half the price of the Samsung Galaxy S8. Now, the S7 Edge is already a really good phone. It comes with a really good camera, really good specs. The display is just amazing. The design is still one of the best looking phones on the market right now. So is it actually worth getting a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge over the Samsung Galaxy S8 just because this one is cheaper, or should you just wait and pay more for the Samsung Galaxy S8 because it comes with more features and more interesting, cool new things? So hey everyone, welcome to the ZONEofTECH. I'm Daniel, and welcome to my in-depth comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge and the Samsung Galaxy S8, the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S8. So in this video, I'll be covering everything from the display, the design, specs, special features, camera, price, storage options, colors, battery, everything you need to know is covered in this video. So I did a few days ago, I did a similar video on the S8 versus the iPhone 7. In case you want to check that out, the link for that is in the description. But other than that, grab some popcorn because this is going to be another one of those long and in-depth videos. So yeah, enjoy. So section number one, we have the design. So the biggest difference between these two phones is not the camera, not the specs, not the special features, but actually the design. So in terms of the design style, we basically have the exact same design style. So we have glass on both the front and the back, and then we also have a metal and aluminum actually border surrounding the phone. But the main difference now is that we have some massive displays. So the display size on the Samsung Galaxy S8 has been increased from 5.1 inches on the S7 to 5.8 inches, and then 6.2 inches on the S8 Plus, from 5.5 inches on the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. Now this display size increase is just massive, so this means that in 2017, even the smallest Samsung device, flagship, the S8, is larger than the Note 7, which was the flagship of 2016. So 5.8 inches versus 5.7 that we had on the Note 7, or 5.5 that we had on the S7 Edge. So yeah, the display size got some pretty big improvements. However, the biggest improvement is not the display size itself, but the sizes of these phones. So just take a look at this. The S8 is only a tiny bit larger than the S7, and yeah, not by much. However, it comes with a 5.8 versus 5.1 inches display, and the S8 Plus is, yeah, still taller than the S7 Edge, but it comes with a massive 6.2 inches display. So you basically get so much more screen in almost the same form factor as before. Now, besides the form factor and the display size, another design difference between these two phones is in terms of the home button. So the home button and the back and the multitasking buttons, all of these are now on-screen buttons. So no more physical and no more capacitive buttons on screen, just like on the Google Pixel and on so many Android smartphones. Now, unfortunately, because of the removal of the home button, a downside to the S8 is that it now has the fingerprint reader on the back instead of having it on the front, even though Samsung actually had a couple of patents showing a fingerprint reader embedded into the display assembly. Unfortunately, that never ended happening, most likely because of the production issues that Samsung had with that display. So yeah, fingerprint reader on the back, and unfortunately it's not even in the middle on the back, it's actually on the right hand side of the back. So yeah, this is a bit inconvenient. And by the way, Samsung even gives you a warning message when you launch a camera for the first time that you should always clean your lens before taking a photo, because yeah, you will smudge the lens of the camera, confusing it to the fingerprint reader. So yeah, this is a downside, a disadvantage to the Samsung Galaxy S8. Now, also in terms of the design of these phones, when it comes to the colors, the Samsung Galaxy S8 only comes in two colors in all markets. So you can get it in black, which is now called Black Sky, and then you can also get it in Orchid Gray, which is sort of like this pinkish gray color. Then you also have a couple of more colors, such as you have a blue one, which is only available in the US, and then you also have Arctic Silver and Gold, which are available in Asian markets, and so on. Now, the biggest change when it comes to the colors on the S8 are not the colors themselves, because overall they're almost the same as on the S7 Edge, except for that Orchid Gray. The biggest difference is that now with every single color, you get a black front. So no more colored front that matches the back of the phone like we had on the S7 and the S7 Edge. So with these phones, if you got, let's say, if you got a gold version of the S7 Edge, you would also have a golden, so to say, front. On the S8, that front is black. However, with the S8 now, the borders or the rim, the metal rim surrounding the phone, the aluminum rim, is now color matched to the back of the phone. So if you get a black Samsung Galaxy S8, that border will be jet black or glossy black, and it simply looks amazing. If you get the orchid gray one, it will also have an orchid gray color, and so on. Now, just a few more design differences that I want to mention. So the first one is a pretty big one for most users, especially for me. No Samsung logo, finally. So the Samsung logo is gone. No Samsung logo on the front, just one on the back. Finally. The S8 looks so much better with no logo on the front. Other than that, the S8 is a tiny bit thicker than the S7 and the S7 Edge. Not by much though, just by about 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters thick. So you won't actually notice the difference, just something that I wanted to mention. And something that some of you might have not noticed on the S8 is the fact that the edges, actually the corners of the display, are now curved. Well, not actually curved, but rounded. And finally, the edges, the curved glass on the S8 is not as curved as on the S7 Edge. So it's actually much easier to hold in the hand than the S7 Edge was, because this one is quite a bit difficult to hold in the hand. So it's much more comfortable than the S7 Edge was. That's a big plus. Oh, in case you haven't noticed, both the S8 and the S8 Plus now come with curved display panels, unlike the S7 and the S7 Edge, where only the S7 Edge came with a curved display. So yeah, no more flat version of the S8 anymore. But yeah, overall, I would say that the S8 is the best designed phone on the market right now. It simply looks amazing. It simply looks stunning. And yeah, I mean, the biggest difference between these two phones is that you get a much larger display in almost the same form factor as before. And this is an amazing upgrade. Moving on to section number 2, we have the display. Now, apart from the actual display size increase, which again is 5.1 to 5.8 inches and 5.5 to 6.2, apart from the display size increase, we also get some more improvements in the display as well. So the resolution has actually been increased. So on the S7, on the S7 Edge, we had 2560 by 1440, and on the S8 and the S8 Plus, we have 2960 by 1440 on both of them. Now, even though the resolution has been increased, the PPI overall has actually decreased. Now, not by much, just by a few PPI, so you're not actually going to notice a difference in VR, but it's still a Pentel matrix display. So a lot of us, especially myself, were expecting an RGB matrix display on the S8, which unfortunately never ended happening. So in case you don't know, an RGB matrix display has an equal number of subpixels, red, blue, and green. And then if you have a Pentel matrix display, you have more green subpixels than red and blue. Yeah, so long story short, an RGB matrix display is much better in VR than a Pentel matrix display. So long story short, the S8 and the S8 Plus didn't get any improvements when it comes to VR. So they're actually a tiny bit worse than the S7 and the S7 Edge because of that small PPI drop. However, we did get some pretty massive improvements when it comes to the actual colors on the display. So the S8 can finally supports HDR10 and also Dolby Vision, which is incredible considering that this is a mobile phone, not a television. So we finally have an HDR display on the S8. Now, there's one more phone on the market that can do that, and that's the LG G6. So the LG G6 and the Samsung Galaxy S8 are currently the only phones that have an HDR display. You also get that really immersive infinity display. That's how Samsung is calling this, with almost no bezels. So you actually have no bezels on the side and some really small bezels on the top and on the bottom. And apart from this, the display on the S8 and the S8 Plus is actually brighter than the S7 and the S7 Edge, and that's how it can also do HDR10. Now, I'm not exactly sure what's the nits, what's the actual brightness on the displays, but it is higher than the S7 and the S7 Edge, so that's a pretty big improvement. Having a display that's brighter means that it's also much better outdoors, so that's always a welcome improvement. Apart from this, we have Gorilla Glass 5 on the S8 versus Gorilla Glass 4 on the S7, so it's more resistant to drops and even scratches. According to Corning, it can withstand drops of up to 1.6 meters on concrete without breaking, even though a lot of drop tests have showed that it breaks. It does break from heights much lower than 1.6 meters, but yeah, it still is an improvement from Gorilla Glass 4. But the biggest display change, apart from the size and the fact that we now have HDR10, is actually the aspect ratio. So on the S8, we now have an 18.5, by the way, 18.5 by 9 aspect ratio. So this is the widest display on any smartphone out there. The LG G6 has 18 by 9, this is 18.5 by 9, and the S7 and the S7 Edge had 16 by 9, which up until now was basically the standard. Now, the upside to this is that you do get much more screen real estate in most apps. So in Google Chrome, you can see more. In emails, for example, you can see more in Gmail and so on. So overall, you do get more info. However, if you're watching videos, when you're watching videos, especially YouTube videos, most of these are 16:9. So you would actually get black bars. So you would essentially get those bezels back when you watch YouTube videos. So this is a pretty big downside. However, Samsung does give you a crop function. So you can press a button and then the image enlarges and then basically the bezels go away. But yeah, the image is cropped, so yeah, you lose out on some details, since it basically zooms in the image and then cuts it so that it fits the display. But yeah, overall, it's still better to have that extra screen real estate than to not have it. So yeah, overall, the display is a pretty big improvement, apart from the design, on the Samsung Galaxy S8. I would have wished for something like a 4K display, or at least a Quad HD RGB matrix display for VR, but yeah, maybe and hopefully with the Note 8. And moving on to section number 3, we have the specs. So when it comes to the specs, same as on the S7 and the S7 Edge, we basically have two models of the S8 and the S8 Plus. So we have the US model, which comes with a Snapdragon processor, the Snapdragon 835 now, versus the Snapdragon 820. And then we also have an Asian and international version, which comes with the Exynos processor, Exynos 8095 versus the 8090 that we got on the S7 and the S7 Edge. Okay, so how much better are these new processors? Well, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I've already done separate videos on those processors. However, yes, the long story short, yes, they are better, significantly better, I would say, than the previous generation, mostly because they're based on a smaller 10nm process versus the old 14nm process that we had on the S7 and the S7 Edge. So this means that they're about 30% smaller in size, so they do take less space inside the phone, and they're also about 30% more powerful CPU-wise, and about 40% less power consumption, which obviously means better battery life. So when it comes to these, it's a pretty huge improvement. And then when it comes to the actual specs of the CPUs, both of these are octa-core CPUs. So they have two quad-core processors inside, two quad-core. Basically, one of them is a high-performance processor and the other one is a low-performance processor, both of these being 2.35 GHz each. Now, when it comes to the GPUs, we have the Adreno 540 on the US model and the Mali G71 in the Asian/international models. Now, when coming from the old models, which came with the Adreno 530 and the Mali T8080, we do get about a 25 to 35% improvement when it comes to GPU performance. So yeah, a pretty decent improvement. It's not like 100% or 200%. It's not massive, but it's a pretty decent improvement, which you might notice in a few games. Now, when it comes to the RAM, on the S7 and the S7 Edge, we had 4 GB of RAM, and on the S8 and the S8 Plus, we still have 4 GB of RAM. So no RAM changes. However, there is a special model for the Asian markets, a special version of the S8, which is actually more expensive, a $1,000 plus model, and that one comes with 6 GB of RAM. So unless you get that version of the S8, you will get 4 GB of RAM, just like on the S7 and the S7 Edge from last year. And when it comes to the actual performance of the S8 and the S8 Plus, here's the thing. The S7 and the S7 Edge were fast. They were really, really fast, unless you used something like a Google Pixel or an iPhone 7. Those phones are so much faster than the S7 and the S7 Edge. And the fault is not really with the processor inside these phones, it's with TouchWiz. Now with the S8, we do get some TouchWiz improvements, which is now called, well, Grace UX was on the Note 7, and now it's called Samsung Experience, by the way. So we do get some performance improvement. The RAM management is better on the S8, so that's one thing to keep in mind. So yes, it is faster than the S7 and the S7 Edge was at launch. And speaking of performance, the benchmarks for the Exynos 8095 are now live. And as you can see, unfortunately, they're not that much different from the Samsung Galaxy S7 and the S7 Edge. And by the way, when you compare these scores to something like an iPhone 7, when you compare especially the single core scores, because that's the one that matters in most apps, just take a look at how much more powerful the iPhone 7 is. And by the way, even the iPhone 6s is more powerful than the Samsung Galaxy S8 when it comes to a single core score at least. So performance-wise, the S8, yes, it is an improvement over the S7. However, if you are the kind of person that installs custom ROMs on your phone, or the kind of person that disables every single Samsung bloatware, if you're that kind of person, you can also make your Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge really, really fast. So the performance gains are not that huge in that case. However, if you're the kind of person that uses the phone the way it came in the box and does no changes performance-wise to it, then yeah, the S8 is going to be an improvement over the S7 and the S7 Edge. Moving on to section number 4, we have the camera. Now, when it comes to the camera, there's a lot of controversy here. So a lot of people are saying that the camera is the same. Some are saying that the camera is not the same, that it's completely new and improved. The truth is basically in the middle. So we do have a new camera module on the S8, a new camera module. However, it has the exact same specs as on the S7. So we have the exact same sensor size, the exact same pixel size in the sensor, We also have the exact same aperture, f1.7, the exact same resolution, 12 megapixels as on the S7. Then we also get 4K at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 60, and 720p slow motion at 240, by the way. Okay, so do we actually get any camera improvements on the S8 or not? And the answer is yes, we do. Not a lot of improvements, but we do get some nice improvements when it comes to image processing. So we do get a faster ISP. So the ISP inside the S8 is about 40% faster, which means that HDR images do process faster. And Samsung Galaxy S8 now uses an HDR mode that's really similar to the one on the Google Pixel, so HDR+. It's not exactly the same, but when you take a photo, the photos look so much more vibrant than the ones on the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. So yeah, images are indeed better than on the S7. So color-wise, colors are much more vibrant. Exposure-wise, the exposure is so much better. And yeah, overall, the processing is better than on the S7. Unfortunately, we don't have any improvements when it comes to low lights, and the aperture and also the sensor size have remained the same. However, where we do get an improvement is in terms of the front-facing camera. So the front-facing camera is now an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, up from a 5 megapixel one that we had on the S7. This can also record video, same as before, and up to 1440p resolution, up to 30 frames per second, by the way. And besides this, the 4K video recording is a tiny bit better because the bitrate has been slightly improved. So we now get about 80 to 85 megabits per second from 60 to 75 that we had on the S7. So yeah, basically when it comes to the camera on the S8, we have no significant improvements like we did, let's say, from the S6 to the S7 or from the S5 to the S6. You will notice some small improvements when it comes to processing. So if you want better color, more vibrant photos, then the S8 is indeed a better option. But yeah, it's not a huge improvement, so it's not worth getting the S8 just for that camera. Moving on to the special features, let's take a look at all the new special features on the Samsung Galaxy S8. Now, I'm not going to mention all the features of the S8, especially not the ones that are also on the S7, like wireless charging, water resistance, and microSD card support. So all of those features are still here. If I don't mention something, it means that it's not here on the S8. So the S8 does indeed come with quite a few new features, the biggest one being Bixby. So Bixby is a new voice assistant. It's really similar to the Google Assistant and Google Now. Now the only thing with Bixby is that Samsung wants it to be the replacement for Google Assistant, but then again, it's not. So you still have Google Assistant on your phone. If you hold the home button, you have the Google Assistant, and then for Bixby, you actually have another button on the left-hand side of the device, an extra button just for Bixby. And the question is, would you actually use Bixby over something like the Google Assistant? Probably not, mostly because Google Assistant works best with Google apps, and Samsung's Assistant, the Bixby, works better with Samsung apps. And how many of you use the Samsung Calendar over the Google Calendar, or the Samsung Notes over Google Keep, and so on? Let me know in the comments, by the way, who still uses Samsung Milk. Obviously, it doesn't work anymore because it's dead. Who was using Samsung Milk up until, I think it died in December. Now, another downside to Bixby is that you cannot remap that button, that Bixby button, out of the box. So, I mean, you can remap it if you use different apps, such as packages disablers, and so on. So you can remap it if you really know what you're doing. But for the average person, you won't be able to remap it to something like Google Assistant. Hopefully, this is going to be fixed in an update, because I would love to have a separate dedicated Google Assistant button on the side, or a camera button. That would be pretty cool. And we also have something really interesting with the S8, and that's this DX dock or DeX dock. This allows you to basically transform your S8 into a desktop computer. So with a DX dock, you can connect your S8 to a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, and yeah, you can basically transform this into a desktop computer, sort of. So it's not running Windows or Linux, or not even to mention macOS. It's basically running Android. It's basically running a version of desktop version of Samsung's experience. So it looks kind of weird, and obviously the apps are limited. You won't be able to use any desktop apps that you're familiar with. So it's mostly for web browsing. And the question is, would you actually buy that 150 pound dock just so that it can use Samsung's browser full screen on a monitor? Probably not. Speaking of new accessories, we have another one which is actually free. So you do get free headphones, free premium headphones in the box tuned by AKG. Other than that, a really big feature of the Samsung Galaxy S8 is actually Bluetooth 5.0. So not a lot of people know this, but the Samsung Galaxy S8 is actually the world's first smartphone to come with Bluetooth 5.0. So what does Bluetooth 5.0 mean? What advantages would you get over something like Bluetooth 4.0, which is what we had, 4.2 actually, on the S7 and the S7 Edge? Well, you do get twice the speed. You actually get 4 times the range, which means that you can have a Bluetooth connection for up to 120 meters of distance, which is just crazy. But the biggest feature is that you can actually connect and use two audio devices, Bluetooth audio devices at the same time. So you can have two Bluetooth headphones, two separate people with Bluetooth headphones listening to different music on the same Samsung Galaxy S8, which is just amazing. But besides all these new special features, the S8 also comes with an iris scanner, just like the Note 7 came with. This is an improved version, by the way, of that iris scanner, and also face unlock. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, face unlock doesn't work that well. I mean, it works, it's really, really fast. However, you can actually unlock it by simply using a photo. So yeah, it's not that secure. So at the moment, the most secure way to unlock your S8 is still by using a fingerprint reader on the back or by using that iris scanner. Besides this, we also have USB-C with USB 3.1 support, by the way, Gen 1, unfortunately not Gen 2. So up to 5 gigabits per second, which is pretty impressive considering that this is a smartphone, not a full-fledged computer. So yeah, this was mostly done because of that DX dock, so that you can connect it to a even 4K monitor. And finally, we also have faster UFS. So that comes from Universal Flash Storage. So the storage is faster, the internal storage, than on the S7 and the S7 Edge. Now the external one is still UHS 1, unfortunately, not UHS 2 or 3. So yeah, when it comes to the new features, we do get quite a lot of new special features on the S8. Now, I would say that there's nothing truly impressive, unique about those special features. I mean, yeah, the iris scanner is cool. That face unlock is cool, I would say. But then on the S7, you have a fingerprint reader on the front, which I would say is more useful than the iris scanner and that face recognition combined. So yeah, let me know in the comments what do you guys think about this fingerprint reader on the back or on the front. Now, moving on to the software, on the S7 and the S7 Edge, we finally have Android N or Nougat, however, only 7.0 at the moment. Now, the S8 is going to come with Android N 7.1.1 out of the box. And we do get a few improvements when it comes to TouchWiz, which, by the way, is not called TouchWiz or actually even Grace UX. On the Note 7, we had Grace UX. Now it's actually called Samsung Experience. Samsung Experience, yeah, that's how it's called now. So it actually looks pretty good. It looks much more modern than before. And one thing to point out is that we no longer have the dock button, the app draw button. We no longer have that. Now, if you want to open up the dock, you have to do the slide up gesture, just like on the Google Pixel. I would say that that's a pretty good improvement when it comes to the stock Samsung launcher. And overall, this new launcher does look a lot better than the previous one. It's much cleaner with less bloatware and performance improvements as well. Now, personally, the only issue that I have with Samsung devices and their software, apart from the TouchWiz lag and the bloatware, is when it comes to updates. So, for example, the Samsung Galaxy S7 and the S7 Edge only got an update to Nougat starting February, and my device actually got an update to Nougat at the end of March. This is an analog device, by the way. Now, with the S7, Samsung did promise more frequent updates with an update to Android N by the end of 2016, which never ended happening. Keep in mind that mine is an analog device, and I got an update to Android N at the end of March. So if you don't have an analog device, you probably don't even have Android N just yet. And it's been almost a month since the official Android N update, and we've had no small update ever since. So we're still on 7.0. So yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that Samsung updates really suck. However, the upside to having Android Nougat on the S7 is that it pretty much looks really similar, almost identical to the S8 one. Obviously, it's not the same launcher, but you can install a third-party launcher that looks identical to the S7, to the S8 one. And yeah, you can even install Bixby if you wish, not officially, but you can do that. So you can essentially turn the S7 into an S8 software-wise. Moving on to the battery life, the battery itself, the size of the battery is actually lower on the S8. So on the S8, we have a 3000 mAh battery versus the also 3000 mAh one that we had with the S7. And then on the S8 Plus, we have a 3500 mAh battery versus the 3600 mAh battery that we had with the S7 Edge. Yeah, on the S8 Plus, this is worse than the S7 Edge, but both of them come with a much larger display, which is also brighter. So it consumes much more energy. So in theory, the battery should be significantly worse than on the S7 and the S7 Edge. Now, the good news is that that's not really the case. So Phone Arena has actually done quite a few in-depth testings of the battery life on the S8. And surprisingly, it's actually better than the S7 Edge. So the S8 Plus has a better battery life than the S7 Edge. Not as good as the iPhone 7 Plus, but definitely better than the S7 Edge. Now, moving on to the models and the capacity, apart from all the color differences that I mentioned before, a pretty major difference when it comes to the capacity is, well, the capacity. So the baseline model on the S8 is 64 gigabytes now, which was 32 gigabytes on the S7. So we get double the storage, and then you still have that microSD card support. So you can extend that storage up to 128, actually up to 256 gigabytes more, which is pretty impressive. Again, keep in mind that you only have UHS 1 on those microSD cards, so they're going to be significantly slower than the internal storage, so don't install any high demanding apps there, such as games or anything that you want to load fast. So go ahead and put pictures, music, and anything that you don't use, that you don't need to access quickly. And finally, when it comes to the prices, here are all the prices for the S8 and the S8 Plus and the S7 and the S7 Edge for US, Europe, and UK. And as you can see, unfortunately the S8 is about $100 or £100 more expensive at least than the S7 and the S7 Edge. And by the way, these were the prices of the S7 and the S7 Edge at launch. Now the S7 is actually way cheaper now. We can essentially now find an S7 Edge, a new S7 Edge, at even half the price of an S8 Plus. Actually, in some cases, even less than that. So having said all this, should you get an S8 or should you get the S7 Edge? And I would say it depends. The S7 Edge is already a really good phone, an amazing camera, which the S8 already has pretty much the same camera almost as the S7. The performance improvements are good, but they're not amazing. The biggest difference actually is that display, because you get a much better display when it comes to colors, HDR10, an 18.5:9 aspect ratio, not even to mention a much larger display and almost the same form factor as before. So if the display is your number one concern about the S7 and the S7 Edge, if you want a larger display and almost the same form factor and before, then definitely get an S8. Otherwise, I would say no. The S7 Edge is an amazing deal at the moment. So I would say get an S7 Edge or simply wait until the Note 8, especially the Note 8, because some rumors are pointing towards a 4K display on the Note 8, which means that a Note 8 would be amazing for VR. But yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, you might enjoy this one as well. Samsung Galaxy S8 versus iPhone 7. So if you want to see how the S8 compares to the iPhone 7, definitely check out this in-depth comparison here. But yeah, also if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos, more Samsung Galaxy S8 coverage, and also don't forget to enable notifications on my channel so that you're notified whenever I upload a brand new epic video. Also, feel free to give this video a like if you have enjoyed it. It took a pretty long time to make, so every single like is really appreciated. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you're epic enough to make it until the end of this video by saying I was epic enough to make it until the end. And finally, what do you guys think about the S8 versus the S7 and the S7 Edge? Which one would you pick and why? Would you pick the S8 or the S8 Plus or the S7 or the S7 Edge? I would personally pick the S8, the regular S8. Other than that, this was pretty much it for this video. So thank you for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.